Okay, this is Senate Government Operations. It is Tuesday, January 19th. And just to give a little, some of the ground rules again, and I know that everybody's used to them, but just in case people are watching or not watching or want to end up joining us, we have the committee and our staff are the ones that are actually in the meeting. We have people who have been asked to testify who are will call on, and then there are people who might be observers in the room with us, just as they would be in the State House, who may or may not get a chance to speak. That's completely up to the time we have and how we operate. And then there are people watching on YouTube. And I ask people, I don't know what the policy is around the YouTube chat. I don't know that there's been a policy made about that, but I ask people in this committee not to use the chat function except for Gail to post links to things that are brought up. Because if we were in the room, in the committee room, we wouldn't allow side conversations to go on. And that I consider chat to be side conversations. And so we do not, don't use it. So with that, Michelle, do you know everybody in this committee?
I do.
Okay, great.
Nice to see everybody.
So Michelle isn't normally with us because she doesn't normally deal with municipal issues or elections or any of the things we deal with, but Michelle is the person who knows about cannabis laws and where we've gone in the years that we've been dealing with it. And so what we have in the last year in the bill that we passed, it dealt with the opt-in, opt-out section for municipalities around cannabis establishments. And there is a bill introduced this year. There is a bill introduced this year that would change that. So what I'm going to do is ask Michelle to walk through what is current law, meaning what we passed last year and became law without the governor's signature. And if anybody has any questions about that, and then ask Michelle to pull out the section on S25, which is the bill that addresses the cannabis changes this year. Does that, and then have Tucker and Gwynn answer any questions about, oh, and there's Karen, to answer any questions about what other responsibilities towns have and authority and responsibilities. So we'll go into that also. Does that make sense, committee? To do it that way? Okay. So then, Michelle, if you want to start us off with a look at what the current law says around and does everybody know what the opt-in, opt-out? Well, I'll let Michelle explain that when you do your.
Sure.
Okay.
So I am going to pull up and share the screen, or attempt to, so hopefully that'll go well. I'm still a little new on the screen sharing, but so for the record, although I guess you know them because we're all on Zoom, Michelle Childs with Legislative Counsel, and there's so much that happened obviously last year with regard to the cannabis regulation issue and the passage of 164. But I'm just going to focus on the opt-in, opt-out as it relates to towns. Some things that you need to know in terms of background to look at this one little narrow issue are that you wouldn't really see any permitting of by the state or licensing by the state of any cannabis establishments until March of 2022. So this isn't immediately right in front of you. The board right now hasn't even been seated yet. There's a nominating committee that will be vetting the names that the governor sent to them. Then the board will have to be seated, and then they embark on a process of rulemaking and kind of standing up the board and getting everything rolling before they start accepting applications at the state level for cannabis establishments. And so in the meantime, the towns have an opportunity to weigh in as to whether or not they want retail sales of cannabis in their town. So right now there's in the law, and I'm going to work on sharing. And tell me if this is working. Can you see that okay? Everybody all right? Okay. So
Yep.
there are new chapters within Title VII, the placement of cannabis. Cannabis has always been dealt with and still is to some extent in Title 18 in the health title concerning regulated drugs. And so the penalties there around illegal possession and dispensing and sale are still in 18. But for regulation of cannabis establishments, that is now in Title VII. And so there's a section within there that lays forth the process for towns to go through if they want to allow retail cannabis sales in their town. And so for the opt-in, opt-out, there are, it's only the retail sales that have to be approved by the town. All other types of licensees would be permitted as long as they qualify at the state level and are issued a permit at the state level. And so there are, just so you kind of have an idea of the range of licenses, there are cultivator licenses, wholesaler licenses, product manufacturer licenses, testing labs, retailers, and then there's a sixth license, which is called an integrated license. And those licenses, there can only be a maximum of 5 because they're only available to the existing medical cannabis dispensaries. So I know this committee has dealt with this issue over the years, so you're somewhat familiar with it. And so for the medical dispensaries, they are vertically integrated, which means that under their current license and going forward, they would be able to do everything from cultivation to sale under the one license. In the new adult use market, you have to get different licenses to engage in different activities. And so this one particular new license under the adult use is specifically for dispensaries that want to stay vertically integrated and participate in the adult use market. And so you see in section 863, the language there in subsection A is that prior to a retailer or an integrated licensee, and I will mention that what is the intent here on the integrated licensee is it means the retail portion of the licensee. So it's, I think when we were working on that, it was understood by everybody in the committee, but now there's questions about it. So it's one of the things that S25 clarifies. So basically prior to either of these types of licensees selling cannabis in a town, the municipality shall affirmatively allow the operation of those establishments by majority vote, either at an annual or special meeting that's warned for that purpose. And you see on the last line, they can either put both, and there's no specific language that's included in the statute as to how the language must appear. They have the option of just putting something on that says, you know, will we allow retail sales? They could say, do we want to allow retailers and integrated licensees? They could say, should we just allow integrated? So they have some options there. And so it has to be put to the town. It can't be something that's done by the select board or the city council. The residents have to vote on it. And then you'll see in subdivision A2, the vote remains in effect until rescinded by a majority of the voters and in the same manner. So it would have to be put before the voters at an annual or special meeting. And you'll see there about halfway down, if that affirmative vote is later rescinded by the town, that if you have a licensed retailer integrated licensee operating in that town based on the prior vote, it doesn't mean that then if they rescind the vote that all of a sudden it kicks them out of town. So you wouldn't have a situation where somebody said, well, the town voted yes, now we've invested this money, we've bought a building, we've set up our whole operation, and now they've changed their minds and we got to shut it all down. Subsection B is that any municipality that hosts a cannabis establishment can establish a cannabis control commission. And this is similar to what they have for liquor, is that would be composed of the commissioners who may be members of the municipal legislative body. I think with liquor, it's that required that they are the members of the municipal body, but I think actually, it might have been in this committee in Senate Gov Ops that you guys wanted to expand it a little bit to have some additional options for other people to sit on those local commissions. And that commission can issue and administer local control licenses. And so those would be separate from the state license. So there's all types of requirements that have to be met in order to obtain a state license to do that. And this would be separate based on the town's inherent authority to be able to regulate with regard to certain aspects of of the business. And you'll see right below there, the commissioners may condition the issuance of the local license upon compliance with any bylaw adopted pursuant to 24 VSA 4414. And I should have refreshed my memory what those are, but I'm sure Tucker can tell us. And 24 VSA 2291. The commission also has the ability to suspend or revoke a local control license for any violations. So if they're not in compliance, because I think that's one of the questions that comes up is, well, maybe the cannabis establishment is in compliance with state law, but what if they're in violation of whatever you have at the local level? And do you have any authority there? The board has to adopt rules. So this is talking about the Cannabis Control Board has to adopt rules relating to the municipality's issuance of a local control license. Again, I believe that is modeled after what you have for liquor. Subsection C, prior to issuing a license, the board shall ensure that the applicant has obtained a local control license from the municipality if it's required. So again, what you have there is that in order for to get your license at the state level, you have to have this town sign off and say if there is a required local license that they have been able to obtain that local license. And then subsection D is just kind of belts and suspenders that a municipality cannot prohibit the operation of a cannabis establishment through ordinances. So you might have heard, I think in past years in anticipation of some type of legislation passing like this, that some towns passed ordinances that said, there shall not be any cannabis businesses in this town. Those would not have the effect of prohibiting it. I mean, they're all prohibited with regard to the retailers and integrated licensees unless you do affirmative vote, but it's specifically saying that you can't. So like, let's say they didn't want a cultivator in the town. They couldn't prohibit that cultivator from being in the town if they obtained their state license. They couldn't prohibit them through the ordinance. And I think that's about it for this one. Does anybody have any questions about this one?
Anybody? Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle, the ordinance, and I am familiar with at least one town in my district that did pass that. Those are normally approved by the local legislative body and not a townwide or municipally wide vote. Is that correct?
I believe so, but I would turn to Tucker for those types of questions.
Okay, so this is saying that even if a local legislative body like a select board or a city council said, we don't want any of these establishments, this supersedes that. Okay.
Well, you wouldn't need to, even if it didn't have that, you wouldn't need to adopt an ordinance to prohibit retail sales because they're prohibited everywhere unless you affirmatively opt in. So there's going to be no retail sales until towns say, yes, we want retail sales in our town. With regard to the other types of licensees, so you have somebody who wants to maybe put up a testing lab or something like that, you could not adopt an ordinance through the select board or city council that prohibited one of those other licensees. You could regulate them through your inherent authority through the local licensing, but you couldn't prohibit them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And through zoning.
Right. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna click over to S25. So it's got a few issues in here. But the first one is amending this exact section that we were just discussing. And so you'll see the new language on there, is that it clarifies on line 10 what I was talking about earlier, that just making it clear that we're talking about the retail portion. Does it not show up? Are you seeing any document?
The same one we had up before.
Huh, okay.
Uh,
Let me try something different. I don't,
Michelle, if it's in
Yes.
another Word doc, then you
Yeah.
might try stop share and then bring that document up in Word and then share again, and it'll show your active Word window with the new document in it.
oh, excellent. Let's see. How about that?
Yep.
That good?
Yes.
Thank you, Tucker. So you'll see,
So, while we're just interrupted, it's Allison. Is it possible also to post, I don't see this, this isn't on our website as a bill into committee, obviously, because I think it's gone into judiciary. Is it possible to post it, Gail, for us so that we can see it on our website while we're talking about it? Because it's too small.
Senator Clark said I did post it, so it should come up shortly if it's not there right now.
Okay, great, thanks.
I'll double check.
Great,
and it's S25 for anybody who's just trying to use
Right.
the site to pop it up if it's not up
Yeah.
on the committee page yet. So you'll see on line 10, there's just the clarification that we're just talking about the retail portion of the integrated, because when you have medical dispensaries, they may have their cultivation operation in one location, and maybe they're where they meet with patients at another location. And so it's not always assumed that when you have an integrated licensee that they have all of their activities in one particular location. Then you'll see down on lines 14 or 15, striking through the language around whether you place retailers or integrated, and it's just focusing on is the town going to allow retail sales? So it sets a date of not later than March 1st, 2022. All municipalities shall place on the ballot the following question: shall licensed cannabis retailers and integrated licensees be permitted to sell cannabis to adults 21 years of age and older in this town? Yes or no? And the chair can speak to why this type of language. But I think what some senators were hearing was that a lot of towns were struggling with, well, what should the language say? And, does it all need to be the same? And what should the question be? And so this just kind of lays it out there, and we can play with this language if you want to pursue this provision with kind of how you want to present the question. This idea is based on what happened with towns with regard to alcohol. And so it used to be that the towns would all vote on that, and then on a regular basis. And then I believe in 1968, and I can pull up the statute and send it to Gail just if you want to take a look for just for fun. It said that all towns had to put the issue around alcohol sales on the ballot at a certain date, and so that all towns were voting on it at the same time. And then that would be their vote unless the town went back later and changed their vote. So it moved away from them constantly having to revisit the issue, and they all took a vote at the same time. And so this is that same idea.
And I think there was a huge issue around speaking by omission. I mean, adopting something by omission, because towns, if they just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and there was an inherent prohibition. And so
Right, I think, yeah, that it was a good idea to let people who were interested in entering the market have an idea of which towns were going to be allowing retail sales and which ones weren't. And that if it was just kind of constantly changing, it might be hard to get the new regulated market up and running. So, and there's no other changes to that section. So it's just this one with regard to the ballot language.
Anybody have any questions on that? The,
I do.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. Senator
It's okay.
Polina?
It's just about the date. I mean, I understand you're saying March 1st, 2022, because that's when these establishments could start getting licensed, right? But it seems like unless they vote on it, when would the towns be voting on something like this? Would they, they couldn't do it next town meeting, meaning not this town meeting, 2021. But they'd have to have it done before town meeting of 2022. So I'm just curious, where would it go? We're not going to do a special election, right? Would it just be part of an ongoing election procedure? When might they vote on this?
They could vote on it anytime they wanted to.
So it'd have to be like a special vote for the town.
They could vote on it at this town meeting if they wanted to.
Well, sure, if they had time. All right, I was just curious about the date. No big
And we
deal.
might, in thinking about that, we might want to change it from March 1st to whenever the day after town meeting in March in 2022 is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking was logically people would want to do it on town meeting day. But I
think
doubt
I
they'll have
looked-
to take it.
I
I'm
think I
sorry.
looked it up, but I think that is town meeting day.
March 1st, really?
I think it's the first, I thought it was the first Tuesday after the first Monday. Or is that us?
Oh, then
It's the
that may
first
be right.
Tuesday.
Tucker?
It
The
is
first
the
Tuesday
first
after the first
Tuesday.
Monday, I thought, okay.
It's the first Tuesday in March. It might very well be March 1st, 2022, although I haven't
I
looked
think,
into it.
yeah, I think I had looked it up and that was what I was anticipating was town meeting day.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I was anticipating town meeting day also. I just didn't know it'd be March 1st, so early.
Michelle
It
is spot
is the
on.
first. Yeah.
Michelle is spot on. That's the date. Big surprise. Michelle's always spot on.
Jeanette, I have a question. I don't know if you can see me.
So the alternative to this was to change it from an opt-in to an opt-out. But
Which,
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
yes, I'm sorry, Keisha. I can't see anybody because
Yeah.
of the share. Can we take the document down now unless anybody has more questions about it? There, thank you. Okay. Senator Rom?
I'm calling in a newbie question, and I swear that Gwen did not ask me to ask this question. I can't remember. Do towns get to include a 1% local option tax with this question?
Oh, I will tell you what, I have another bill actually that relates to this. Currently, the towns will get nothing except some insane fees that state will decide and will put on, which means that it will increase the it will increase the cost to the consumer because you're piling on fees upon fees upon fees, state fees and then local fees. A town that does have a 1% option right now, sales tax option, can apply it to that because it is a sale.
Okay.
The Senate had allowed a 2% option for just this product. And the House did not agree. And we then have I am suggesting, and the Senate voted on, a portion of what comes to the state. So 14% of the sales go into the general fund. Of that, 12% would go to 12 to there, and 2% of the sales would go to the towns by a formula designed by the Cannabis Board. But that was defeated.
Okay.
And we'll try again this year.
Great.
I don't know if that made any sense or not.
That did, and I support trying again.
Senator Clarkson?
so I'd like to go back to the question you just asked about opt-in versus opt-out. I never was happy that it was an opt-in. Do we have the opportunity with this bill to turn it into an opt-out?
we could suggest that. I think it would be a harder. Anthony, will you take over for a second here?
Sure, but I don't know exactly what was in Jeanette's mind when she got distracted, but
Oh, she's
Question.
just being asked a question.
so the opt-out would be harder, she thinks, to achieve politically, I think. Do
Oh,
others have? Yeah, no,
was that the issue with the conference committee? Was that the opt out was a harder thing to get through?
The House would not accept an opt-out.
Right, that's what I recall, right, as we followed this last year. Yeah, it's too bad. Anyway, there we are. So changing that at this point, probably things haven't changed in the House.
Not enough.
And VLCT was very successful in this because I think this was a VLCT choice to have an opt-in.
They did choose that, and I'll let them speak to that, but I think they were more concerned about the revenue sharing than, and would have given up opt-in, opt-out for revenue sharing, but we got neither. Karen or Gwen, do you want to?
Comment on the opt-in, opt-out?
Yeah.
Revenue sharing.
Yeah.
And revenue sharing if you want.
Sure, thank you. Madam Chair nailed the head of the nail with that. I think that we put forth the proposal of the opt-in, but we're willing to take it down if we got some revenue sharing or a out of the gate local option cannabis tax of some sort, and we got neither.
Does that answer your question, Senator?
Yeah, but you did get the opt-in. I mean, you did get that.
Well, to be fair, we got an opt-in for only retail. We have every other type of operation going into every town without any say. So there's, whether it's a manufacturing or light industrial sort of operation, if they're, doing testing or, a laboratory or maybe production, or if they're cultivators, no matter how big or small, and everything in between. So we kind of got an opt-in into that, but it was only for retail.
But all those other facilities or establishments, I guess is what they're called, will have to comply with local zoning. So you couldn't put a manufacturer, if you have a residential area and you don't allow any kind of manufacturing there, maybe a home office, they'd have to comply with whatever local zoning there is.
One assumes.
Well, that's up to the communities to enforce their local zoning. If they choose not to enforce their local zoning, then. And currently this is not considered an agricultural product in the sense that it does not, agricultural products or agriculture does not have to comply with zoning regulations. They have kind of carte blanche. But this is not considered an agricultural endeavor for purposes of getting out of zoning or paying sales tax on their purchases. Am I right about that, Michelle?
Yes.
So any more questions or concerns or anything about this? If we would set that date and Senator Clark.
Thank you. I think this may backfire on Representative Ansel because she hates local option taxes. And this is going to, if towns are not able to adequately revenue share, which has been a problem ever since this bill was passed. I mean, more towns are going to want to do local option tax. So it's just going to drive local option tax, which of course Representative Ansel's going to hate.
Well, it was her choice. The House could have gone along with us with this revenue sharing proposal that we had, which seemed to us reasonably fair. That and it so
Well,
so that was the House's choice.
right,
And-
because currently, just remind me, I should know this, but with alcohol sales, the license, it's shared. There's a percent that goes to the state and the percent the town keeps, isn't that right?
No, I don't think so. Is that right?
No?
That's right. The statutory fees for certain types of licenses are split between the state and the municipality. But again, it depends on the type of licensee. And I believe last session there was a miscellaneous alcoholic beverages bill that was going to allow municipalities to retain portions of third-class license fees
Right.
that are administered specifically at the local level. But to date, that has not been codified. So I think it's really only first-class licensees where there's revenue sharing on those fees between the state and local legislative or municipalities.
But
But
in Sunday,
it's the fee, it's a sharing of the fees. It's not a sharing of the revenue. And that is where this was so important, is because we kept hearing from the town, from the House committee, that they were very interested in ways to be able to share revenue with municipalities. And yet, this is a brand new source of revenue. So it doesn't remove any revenue from any other stream. This is brand new. So this is the ideal place to begin to share revenue, but they didn't see it that way. The comment in our conference committees a number of times was, we're very willing to start looking at sharing revenue with towns. And we kept saying, but where are you going to do that? Are you going to take it from the regular sales tax or from the property transfer tax, or what are you going to do? And they said, well, we'll think of something, but not now. So I'm just telling you that was, so Senator Pauline, I think you had a question.
Well, you kind of just answered it in a way. It just seems odd. They want to do revenue sharing, but they said no to revenue sharing. That's it's just confusing. And revenue sharing, just to be clear, is different than the local option tax. I mean, I know the difference. It's just it's different. But
Yeah, the way
it's odd that they say they want it, but then they rejected it. I don't get it.
Well, they rejected it with the obvious choice was with a brand new source of revenue, so
Right.
it wouldn't impact any other revenue source, but they just were unmovable.
Do you think it was more that the Ways and Means Committee was unmovable?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, as opposed to the other members of the House may have been open to it.
Well, they may have been. Senator Clarkson?
so do you think, in light of COVID and the challenges municipalities and states are facing, I know we see that there may be hope down the track with the Biden-Harris administration, but do you think there's any more understanding that revenue sharing might be essential for municipalities facing some of the COVID revenue challenges we're facing?
No.
Do you think the atmosphere has changed at all around revenue sharing, is I guess what I'm asking?
My guess is, and I hate to say this, but as long as the finance committee is Ways and Means is made up by the members that are there now, it is not a change. So I don't know what more to say, but I do have a bill, and I suspect it won't go to our committee, but will go to finance because it is a finance issue. So we'll see what happens.
And just finally, would the revenue sharing be just with the specific town that has the retailer, or would revenue sharing be broader than that?
The way we left it in our proposal was that the cannabis board would come up with some kind of a formula, and they could do it we didn't get into that kind of detail, but they would do it by, if there are 5 kinds of establishments, right? So they could come up with a formula. I don't know how they would do it based on the type of impact that might be felt by a retail establishment as opposed to a producer, or so that they would come up with the formula of how, and then we would approve that formula of how it would be shared. So if a town presumably had no establishments at all, then they probably wouldn't get any share in any of the revenue. If they had an establishment of every sort, then they might get a bigger share of the revenue. But that was up to the board to determine.
Right. Okay.
Senator Clarkson?
So, it's just, I mean, now that it's all coming back. It's all coming back. And I mean, the challenge is, what's the carrot for towns to opt in? I mean, if they aren't a local option tax town, what is the carrot for them if there's no revenue sharing? Like the zip.
Gwen, did you want to zip?
Well, I just wanted to comment that most of the cities and towns we've heard from who have are either putting it on the ballot for March, or are thinking of doing it as soon as the COVID issue sort of died down, and they can do a special election, or put it on a ballot. They are towns that have the local option sales tax in place already. Most of the towns that don't are now trying to figure out how they might splice and dice the sales tax, because they have interest in applying it to cannabis establishments, but not necessarily every establishment in town. And is there a way to word a charter amendment, or even introduce a charter to the legislature to adopt a cannabis tax of some sort, or just limit the sales to cannabis establishments? It hasn't been done before, obviously, but it's worth a shot. The town of Eden last year had a charter amendment for, I think it was rooms and meals, but I think they took out the meals and only applied it to rooms. So at least that's one example of a town that's done it a little bit differently. So I think you're absolutely correct, Senator Clarkson, is that a lot of towns, when there's that carrot right there, they're more apt to line up first in line. And when there isn't, there is no incentive.
Right. So this is really a classic example of be careful what you wish for, because you may get the unintended consequence of ballooning local option taxes, which I know Ways and Means is going to be unhappy with.
Or ballooning charters that are designed just for this purpose, which is what we saw before when we wouldn't let them have hire their town clerks.
Right.
Or no towns opting to have the marijuana retailers in their town, because there's no benefit to it.
Oops.
Exactly.
Sorry. Yes, please, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So back to the question at hand, if I could. The thrust of S25 doesn't change the opt-in or opt-out situation. All it does is require municipalities to take a vote by a certain date. Is that correct?
Michelle?
And so I know it was Senator Benning that introduced the bill. I'm just wondering what was the problem with what we passed before? Why did he feel the need to put a temporal sort of limit on this?
Well, I can tell you because I'm on there too.
Okay.
Because if a town just didn't have a vote, say the town of Putney, we have a center. I mean, we have a pretty vibrant, we hope, little village center here, right, Tucker? And
Santa's Village.
So if our select board just never put it on, a retailer wouldn't know. I think I have a great business that could land in Putney. I think that it would be great. We have Landmark College here. Yay. We have a lot of stuff. And so I want to put a retail establishment in Putney, but I don't know if I'd even be allowed to, because it's prohibited until they have a vote. And so it gives some clarity and some deadlines for people to know where it can be and where it can't be. And Tucker, if you have a better explanation than that, I just thank you.
It was a wonderful explanation of how a legislative body could, as you put it, delay the vote by omission and never bringing it up. But unless we forget, based on recent discussions in this committee, voters can add an article to the ballot by petition.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially you could have 5% of the voters in a municipality petition to add this as an article on the ballot, and the local legislative body would be compelled to allow the opt-in vote to happen.
Right, that could. And if you had 5% of the voters that were so motivated, it would probably take some lobbying by whoever the retail establishment people were that might want to set up in Putney.
Thank you.
Senator Clarkson?
May I ask Gwen, how many towns have it on the ballot this March? I think quite a few, like five or six. Well, that's not quite a few, but
I don't know exactly where we're at right now, but as far as I heard, there were 4, but there might be more that are adding it. I don't have an updated list.
Yeah, not that many.
Well, I think a lot of the towns are, I mean, this is another thing that I'll take this opportunity, if it's okay to comment, is that, we're putting a lot of trust in the Cannabis Control Board to look out for the interest of municipalities. Even the board hasn't been set up. The rules and the regulations haven't been put out. It won't be put out for quite a while. Towns are not able, other than their zoning, and again, their zoning might be impacted by the rules that are promulgated by the state. They have very little time as is to understand what the implications might be to how they regulate, if they regulate, and how they might change or consider changing their zoning to adapt to the standards that are in place for how they're going to license and permit these establishments. Obviously towns haven't even put together cannabis control boards. They're being asked to have voters and towns educate voters on making a decision that they literally know nothing about, other than just saying, do you want this or not, but not knowing or understanding the true implications of what's coming their way. And so towns as is I've had several conversations with town managers and administrators who are saying, we want to deal with this, but we have so much going on right now with town meeting. We are just trying to get our budget adopted. We can't even consider this. We know that the voters want to do it, but we haven't had enough interest from voters to put it on just yet. Maybe, next year or later on this year, we'll do it when it's a little bit easier. And so I think that increased time crunch will not be appreciated by a lot of towns who are really struggling as is to understand what the implications of the potential rules that are coming down from the states. And when voters are asking their select boards and their town managers and such, what does this mean? What are the implications? They don't have answers for them because they don't know yet. And I think this is putting the priority on businesses and their ability to get what they need, but very little consideration, if any consideration, is being given to the town's needs and what the voters may want. And I think that's a real problem. It's been a problem as is with the law, but it would be even increased with this because voters and town needs would be put below the needs of businesses and potential licensees.
So are you saying that the March 22 date is too soon?
I think for a lot of towns, it absolutely is. I think I think what you'll find is that a lot of the larger towns who have professionalized zoning officials that are fully staffed, it might not be a problem. They're probably already on it. But a lot of the smaller communities that don't have those resources, they're going to be struggling. And I think that what their problem is now is that they just don't have enough information to educate their voters, and they can't find any information anywhere. And will be, yeah, essentially being asked to weigh in something while not being fully prepared to understand what the implications are. And so I think that the March date is very ambitious for, I would say, most towns, but nothing's preventing towns right now from going in and voting. And the towns that are feeling really, woohoo, we don't even care what the regulations are going to say, we'll deal with it anyways, they're already going to the ballot box. And there's a lot of them that are going to consider it later on in the year or early next year anyways. So I don't think we really understand the need for expediting this just yet, because I think we haven't even gotten to the March town meeting date to see what the results are. And I think that additionally, if a town decides or a city decides, and the voters decide actually, because they're the ones who are making the decision, whether or not they want to allow retail operations in their community, they're going to be rewarded by probably having the first licensees in the town, because their businesses will know where they are accepted. And so they're taking a gamble, but they might be getting an award in the long run. So yeah.
So maybe what we should do is, I'm kind of aware of the town here, and I see that Tom Little and Jason have joined us. So maybe what we should do is, Michelle, if you could give us a timeline of when decisions are supposed to be. We know they're already a little behind the schedule because the Senate was supposed to have confirmed all the cannabis board appointees by the 15th of January. And clearly we haven't done that yet. Just for your information, there were 94 people who applied for those 3 positions. But if you could, Michelle, do a timeline for us.
I have a timeline, and I will send that to Gail as soon as I finish up right here, and I'll send that to you. And just so you know, is that based on this timeline, like the chair said, it's probably gonna need a little adjusting, perhaps, but who knows? But the board is supposed to have adopted the rules for the cannabis establishments by March 1st of 2022. So I realize that towns have to work on getting their language, getting things on the ballot prior to that, but rules are the idea was that the rules would be completed by then, and certainly the draft rules will be out and available for comment well before preparations for town, what goes on the ballot for town meeting. So it won't be a total mystery.
Okay, so I think that, if the rules are supposed to be out by March 1st, and then they're supposed to put it on their ballot by January 14th or 23rd, that is pushing it a little bit. So let's take this up again and hear some more thoughts about whether it should be moved out even a few months. It doesn't have to be moved out a full year. It could be moved out 5 or 6 months or whatever. But and hear from some town clerks maybe and some select board members. Okay.
Great.
All right. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So let's put it on. This isn't a terribly high priority because I don't think this bill is going to go anyplace really fast. So in a couple of weeks, we'll put it on. And Gwen, if you could help us then get some select board members and people to come in and talk to us.
Is there any particular towns or cities or input that you're looking for regarding this to help me?
No,
choose towns?
maybe some that have town managers, some that don't, some that
Okay.
just have. I would think that the people who are considering having retail establishments are communities with some kind of village center. I can't, for example, imagine Dummerston thinking about having a retail establishment. They have they have 2 convenience store gas stations. That's it. They have no village center. So, so maybe a town like that may or may not even consider it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe
Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, maybe towns that have put it on the ballot. I mean, it would be just interesting to have a mix of managers, non-managers, towns that have actually chosen to put it on the ballot, what their work was,
Okay,
size, a range of size of towns, and demographic would be interesting, given our social equity caucus work on this bill and the work group. We actually, at some point, I need to speak to the chair because there were some ideas that were raised during the course of our work group work. So not for today, but
no,
at another point.
okay. And then at the same time, if we want to, we can look at any of the other municipal issues around the way the bill as passed is, and if we need to make any changes around any of those,
Good. Great.
because they're not in here.
Senator White, can I add something?
Yeah.
I would suggest, as one of the towns you hear from is Burlington. I know that, and I don't know where things stand now, but I know that Burlington was looking at creating ballot language for this March. And some of the things they were talking about considering were putting certain conditions on the vote, and I don't know that they have authority under the statute to be able to do that. And so I think maybe hearing from them, I did hear that Montpelier just agreed to something. I don't know what that looks like, but I think it'd be good to get some of those, because I think towns are taking very different approaches, and I'm not really sure where Burlington's ending up on that. And
Okay, good thought. Okay, so we will get this set up for a couple weeks from now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks a lot.
Nice
Good
to
to have
be
you
with us.
in our committee.
Okay, committee, we're going to hear the exciting news about the census. We have Jason Broughton with us and Tom Little. Jason is the state librarian, but I don't know what your title is around census. I think you're the census guru, is that?
Yeah.
And Tom Little is the head of the Legislative Reapportionment Redistricting Board, LAB, right? Legislative Apportionment Board.
That's the official title, yes, Senator.
Okay. So with that, and I don't know if everybody saw yesterday that the census director resigned yesterday. He was apparently under a great deal of pressure to make sure that he didn't count any undocumented citizens, any undocumented residents. And he just resigned.
He had
So-
one day. He could have held on for one more day.
Why?
The
Why would we
leadership
want him to?
changes.
Huh?
The leadership changes significantly.
I know, but why would we want him to hang on?
Oh, yeah.
He was not acting in our best interest, in
He was certainly not.
our people. So I'm glad to see him go, as a matter of fact. Senator Rahm?
I just wanted to say, while our state librarian is getting his presentation up, I don't know if this was discussed and I'm completely wrong about this, but I just experienced a really strong census taking operation in Vermont. I just feel like they were at my door 3 times. I ran into them out in the neighborhood, and I just don't know when there might be an opportunity to say thank you to Vermonters who made that possible as well. But I just thought it was a really robust census, and I was really proud of us.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Yeah,
Here, here.
I think you're right. So just, so let's get some kind of an update on it, and I'll let the two of you do this however you see fit in terms of your presentation and what you want to say to us. And knowing full well that if you ever get any numbers, in 2022, in January, we will have to establish a redistricting committee in the Senate. And then our work begins. Your work is beginning now, and then our work begins then. And Tom, I apologize for not giving you a call back. So if you two want to take it away.
I would,
You know everybody on the committee first?
I think so. I've been there a few times before, in one role or another.
Well, we have a new member.
And I know who that new member is.
I know you do.
All right.
I would suggest, Jason, if you don't mind going first and letting us all know what pipeline you have to the U.S. Census Bureau and its data and what progress it is or isn't making.
Oh, starting off with the easy stuff, eh? I see.
Well, I'll just add that the apportionment board has been fortunate to be getting its information from Michael Chernick has been keeping a close eye through the National Council of State Legislatures on which keeps a very close eye on the census. And we've also been working with John Adams at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, who does likewise.
That's right.
All right. Gail, am I able to share my screen? Because I have 17 slides that I'd like for everyone to examine, and then we'll get into the heart of the matter and looking at what Vermont has done. This will give you a snapshot if I can do that.
Jason, I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Thank you. All right.
Surely.
All right. Everybody should see something that says congratulations, Vermont. Hopefully you
We see it.
are. Perfect, perfect. All right. One of the things that was, I would say, starting off, these are the persons who I still can be in contact with regarding the census. Jeff Beller is right in Albany and definitely has his finger on the pulse of what information I would say can be shared with me regarding the status of the amount of information to be released. At last conversation, they are still working to get the report out. As you know, they did not fulfill their constitutional duty and have it provided at the end of last year. But there also seems to be, and again, this is my own personal added piece into this, information that is warranting lots of interesting ways of discussing the census. The report is probably now best to be given to the incoming administration. There was a large effort to have that provided to the current administration, but that, of course, had a lot of backlash, is the easiest way to say that. So now that the current president will not be getting that, it is going to be for the new administration. Now, one of the reasons that people were concerned about the current administration obtaining those census numbers was going to be the removal of unauthorized citizens from that. Vermont had a very nice amount of participation from a variety of people. And that definitely caused some concern, particularly if you start removing population counts from each state. It has impacts to the U.S. House of Representatives, which also then has an impact on the Electoral College. So here is what you're looking at as far as the New England contingent plus New York, with the amount of things working together, particularly housing units. What this presentation is going to do is just give you a look back at all the work that we kind of, in a sense, did, which was quite stunning. So within this, you're looking again at the generous amount of what we consider the population to be at the current moment. Official numbers have not been tallied out. That, however, would be a little bit of a sad note. That did change because Vermont was close to about 129. So there is a bit of a decrease within that. The housing units were quite just stunning. We were able to count a large amount of tracts of housing that, as I understand it, we had not really done before, which meant that we dealt with second and third homes. We dealt with what is a home, what is a dwelling, what's a residence, where people were at. And also people were counted because Vermont did a really wonderful thing by having the homeless population taken off the street and into some form of shelter, which then allowed people to be counted even more. So that was a very unique thing that COVID, unfortunately, but in a nice way, allowed us to kind of do. These were some of the languages that were, in a sense, needing to be spoken to assist people with the census across the New England item. And here is little old Vermont, right here in this slither. And so within that, you can see a really interesting amount of languages spoken, and particularly how many people had to staff that. As you go through, Vermont had a lot of people apply to these jobs. So yes, it does look like a nice thing as a temporary job on your resume to be a federal employee. But that was quite impressive. Now, why is that impressive? We were told that we were not going to be meeting our quota for at least having over 1,000 people hired. And within 3 months, we had 5,000 people actually apply. As you can see, 3,000 were selected, and then they actually hired almost 1,500. So a really, really strong showing of people wanting to do this level of work. Across the state, we had a bunch of partners. And within that, as you can see, yes, 1,469 different sets of partners, 12 local complete count committees, events, 1,024, and commitments to do things with the census over 3,000. Total, there was a goal set by the census to do like 44,000, but that was completely, as you can see, pushed, where we ended up with 55 as a region. Within that, the people who, in a sense, assisted us in a variety of ways. You should see the two largest groups, the 29% and all of a sudden the 25. So you had nonprofits and government, the rest business, faith-based, and of course education. But again, really, really wonderful groups pushing out participation of the census. The MQA, or mobile questionnaire assistance, was something that the census allowed itself to do, where they would go out and actually do census help for people who actually need it in different types of areas that could also be remote. Vermont, we had 449 little tiny events, and that's quite a lot if you consider we did not really start these events until after June. Because remember, as COVID was coming across the state early on, the summer allowed us to be able to do a little bit more things. People started to be able to come out, and the census workers could actually go out into the areas in a very safe way with precautions. Self-reporting. Now, here is where Vermont continues to lag. This is the most important number. Self-reporting means that you go out, you give it your all, and everybody does it within a set time frame of doing it on their own, as opposed to what is called the non-follow-up unit, which means they're going to knock on your door, you didn't respond, they're going to ask you to participate. As a state, Vermont ranks 44 within that, but 60.5% within this. We did have a really nice item, which was we completed the census very, very early as compared to a lot of states. And we ended up in the #1 position for actually doing that. So while the census was completed, the accuracy of it is now the item that people want to discuss, because there are a lot of things. The Bureau itself does acknowledge that there are problems with the reporting. There are questions about how fast the work has been done. Also, a lot of things need to be cleaned up. And so that is the next challenge for the Census Bureau. Of this, here just an item to show you the top 10 and top 5 counties. As you can see, Chittenden right here at 76% within that, Washington at 62 and in orange. And then here are the actual towns that have some very, very unique items. So kudos to these people. I mean, 85% is like stellar for Jericho. It's just amazing to see people actually really, really participating. Here is what was supposed to happen. As you can tell, the apportionment was supposed to go to the president. They are still working on that at the current moment. What is a problem is, one thing is Congress has not picked up the request for relief. This could have been actually avoided a while back if they had done so, because the request was to actually have everything pushed into April and in May to actually release the numbers. Congress has still not picked up the relief for the census. And so things are not necessarily on hold, but they're just going to be given when they can best be given itself. Any questions at the current moment? Here are all the little wonderful items that people did.
Jason, I'm going
Yes.
to just say, if people have questions, please just, while the presentation is going on, just unmute yourself and ask the question, because I can't see you all anyway, so I couldn't call on you. So just ask. Okay.
Madam Chair, it's Keisha. I just want to say for the record, I did self-report, but we moved. And so they were coming to my door because the people who left and moved back to Canada had not reported. So it was, I did try to self-report and encourage others to do so.
They want to make sure, yes, the Census Bureau wanted to do that fully. Here are all just the wondrous amount of things that people did across Vermont to get the census going. So as you can see, you have Governor Scott kicking it off with the formulation of the state complete count committee, Vermont's first. And very important to have that done. Number two, here we were at our kickoff meeting with our, in a sense, partners from the census and a variety of people from across the state. Those smiling people were just wonderful. Of course, they did not know when this was going to be occurring after with COVID, because that was taken in February. So a lot of people seemed happy, and then after that, everything changed. We also had a little logo that was created. Libraries also helped within that. And within that, we also had Chief Don Stevens meet with a variety of people. And here, if you've never seen him, is Dr. Stephen Dillingham, who has resigned. He is there within that. And you also had Bob Stock, who my counterpart here from the Federal Bureau, just really helped me a lot in making sure that we could push through as much as possible. Other items and aspects you have where COVID-19 were challenges. As you can see, restrictions on gathering usually would have counted students, particularly academic areas, already in the spring, but none of that actually occurred until later. And of course, we had the summer of social injustice to be talked about, and all that occurred within this. So you have, of course, the mayor, with, again, the Burlington contingent. Our congressional leaders did a wonderful amount of items. They did PSAs. Senator Sanders also pushed out blog information. We had something within 7 days, the PSA. They, of course, were unhappy, because I'll never forget, I got a clipping from them that said, you need to spend more money to promote the census in 7 days. Please do so as chair. So we tried to do as much as we could, followed by, we asked people in our local complete count committees to do exceptional things, which were put signage out, how to host those tiny events, create posters. So a lot of things continue to go out. Food banks, in a sense, helped. There are images where the Bureau, in a sense, went to a Black Lives Matter protest. You can't see it, but they're kind of right here, if you can, near to the blue tent within that. You had the MQAs, the mobile questionnaire assistants, go out to a variety of locations across Vermont. You also had, again, food banks put items inside places to let people remember that they should participate as much as possible. With that, we also had a lot of news information that came up from across the region. These let people know, in a sense, exactly what they were doing from a variety of items. People were in barbershops, people went to hair salons, a whole host of things all across the contingent when it comes to the region itself. Within that, the census is right now starting to train people on the information that it does have and prepare them for when it does release the full cache of information. And you can, in a sense, I can send those links to you if you are interested in taking some census items. Within that, people also need to remember that the census always has surveys going. The most common one that people should remember is usually going to be the American Community Survey, which is done every 2 years. They also do population counts and also housing surveys as well. And they continually do economic or government items when it comes to the census. The decennial is the easiest one to remember. They only occur in years that end in 0. So the next one will be 2030. And of course, this year's, last year's census was the first to be done virtually. And that kind of concludes all that I actually have. Questions? again, it was a wonderful item to look back as far as what the census took place in Vermont and what we actually tried to do.
Clarkson?
Thank you. Jason, again, we applaud your work on this and your leadership. Vermont is so grateful. It was one robust census. And
Yeah.
I really take my hat off to you. I'm just curious, how do we, I hate to ask, but I feel like I need to, how does our response rate compare to 2010?
It's a little bit better. I'm still waiting to get the full amount, but again, some of the people I could talk to, they let me know like, yes, it's a little bit better, but you know, I had expected more, as almost probably like a point higher than where we were last time. It's still better than nothing, but again, it did increase, and that's going to do a variety of unique things.
Yes. Yeah. I'm profoundly disappointed Windsor County didn't do better.
When you said it, there's a lot of places where I thought we would have had much more participation, but maybe it takes time. Maybe people were tired, and 2020 was a very, very rough year. The wonderful thing that I can say that Vermont hopefully will be getting is much more robust data about locations and geography, and also where people are living or say that they're living, and what's available and what's not. So that's one of the things that I believe Vermont is going to get when they finally release that. The problem again will be, how accurate is it? Because the Bureau usually takes a lot of time to clean up data as they go through. And if you were reading, I can send you links if you would like to. There are people who are questioning the validity of the data because of the way it happened so fast and what actually needed to be done. You do also have parts of the Bureau being asked, well, did you close things too fast? Did you not clean the data up this way? And so that right now is the biggest conversation that's occurring in the Bureau itself.
Jason, did we, I know Windham County was very, very low for a long time. And then there was some, and the legislators kept putting out things in our letters and our press releases and stuff saying, please, please, please. And then there was some information afterwards that related to second homes and how the count was low because of the, we have on the western side of the county, a ton of second homes. In fact, some towns have more second homes than first. So I wonder, did that ever get cleared up?
It did, as best we could. Again, because we had such an amazing amount of people working to clear up those housing stocks, I can't wait to see what the full data comes out with. But people do need to remember, when you're taking the census, particularly in the decennial year, the housing stock is like a weight. And what can occur is there's a two-step process. For those persons who do have their house in Vermont as a second home, when they're completing their census, they are to check a box that actually says what their primary, of course, residence is and where their second home is. And once that is done properly, it removes that out of Vermont's weight and allows it to go up a little bit. But if people didn't do that, it's going to sit there as if a body is in the house, the residence, and that means the person would be seen as, well, obviously you just didn't take the census. So we have to, it's not a strike against you, it just creates more of a problem down the line for your account.
Yeah, and I think that happened a lot in Windham County at first. And so Senator Rahm, Senator Clarkson first. Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jason, you mentioned that we were overall better by about a point than we were in the last census. Do you have a sense of which states, I don't want to say did better, but had more of an increase than we did, and maybe any reasons why?
Oh my goodness. From what I have been reading and also listening to in conversations with, there are some, when it comes to population dynamics, I am very surprised that we were losing a little bit of our population while our surrounding people near us, such as Maine, gained, which was quite interesting to me. Of course, all the others, including New York, but everybody else around us gained, even if it was just small. Within that, I am not particularly sure why that's the case. I think there were a lot of actions that they might have taken earlier. One of the things that I don't want to necessarily complain about, but I wished we had started sooner. A lot of states, particularly your big state, New York started like in 2015, and you can see why that's so important. For states like Vermont, yes, we might say, oh, we can do it in a year. I think it would be best to have, if we were going to do prepare for 2030, maybe around 2027. The state gets people together and start saying, okay, now how are we going to map out, how are we going to count this? And that way people start paying more attention to it, because those states that I have been on the call with across the country that really, really were successful. California did it. They had planned, literally 2010, the minute 2011 started, California was already preparing for 2020. So it would be starting earlier, I think, allowed them to have a complete conversation with all the partners, the legislature itself, and say, here's our plan and here's how we're going to carry it out. And they went off and did that.
Senator Rahm, did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if I was chosen at random or they invited anyone to participate, but throughout the pandemic last year, I was regularly asked questions like, do I have enough to eat? Am I stressed financially? I was so interested in getting that information in the aggregate for our state when I was done. And I didn't know if that's a completely separate process or when the follow-up would be about how people were doing across the state financially and in terms of food security and things like that.
It sounds like what you ended up being able to partake in is the American Community Survey, which goes into those types of questions. They'll go into how you're feeling, your health and wellness. It'll go into your economic item. It'll go into unemployment, saying, how are you feeling about that? So yes, those occur in 2-year cycles. And in some cases, yes, when you find a reliable person to answer, you almost want to come back to that because you're not sure if you're going to ever get that again. So it sounded like they trusted you enough to say, we're just going to keep asking her a bunch of questions because she's giving us all we need. So we thank you for that.
Sadly, I don't, I imagine if I could sit there and answer questions for half an hour or something, I'm not a random sample of the population, but, I was always glad to answer that. And it asked you if you knew other people who were food insecure and things. So I hope we get some good information from that.
Yes, they should be releasing that pretty soon because with the American Community Surveys, they do them really quickly. And then in about 6 months later, usually start to see the results of that because it's supposed to be almost extremely timely.
Senator Clarkson, and then I want to go to Tom for more words of wisdom.
So Jason, once this is all done, I would hope you would put together your lessons learned and your big takeaways to pass on to the next director. I mean, if you stick around for 10 years and do it again, that would be great. But I was just curious if you had received any lessons learned from the director of the 2010 census. And, because 10 years is sadly a long time for us to seem to keep information and actually benefit from experience. So did you get any lessons learned from the 2010 director? And please, I hope you'll pass on for the 2030 director some of your lessons learned.
I would definitely say yes. It was a quick conversation. I like to say my vice president of doing this was Michael Mosier, who is at UVM Data Center. And within that, we are prepared to create a report that we wish to make sure is uploaded and is there for people to know because it shows everything that went right. And then we have these, here's what we could have done better. As for my first conversation, it was very simple. He even did the census and said it was going to be totally different. Within that, though, I never forget his parting words were, well, good luck with that. And that was it. So, yes, we will have a report.
So before we go to Tom, I want to, because Tom might be able to remind me in terms of starting early. I believe it was sometime in the early fall of 2019
Yes.
if I'm not wrong here, that the town of Dover was so concerned about the census that they invited Tom and Secretary Condos to come down to talk to people. And it turned out that there were very few people there, but the people that were really concerned about it, a couple select board members and stuff. Am I right about that, Tom? And maybe we should all think about starting early. It might even been before that.
I went down for that public forum in late September of 2019
Yeah.
at the East Dover Town Hall.
Mhm,
And there was actually pretty good local press coverage, which I think got the word out
mhm.
subsequently. Was the Deerfield Valley News was there, and the Reformer was there.
And I thought they were crazy to start thinking about it so early, but I guess I'm hearing now that they weren't. So Tom, would you like to share your words?
Yes, and you'll have to start waving your arms when you want me to stop, because I could. I'm maybe the biggest nerd in the state of Vermont on reapportionment.
No, one of your team members is.
Yes. Anyway, in terms of what the role of the U.S. Census is in Vermont legislative district reapportionment, it's central and it's critical. We are required by statute, state statute, to use the final U.S. Census figures to prepare our report on the House map and the Senate map. The census data that we use is the federal deadline for getting that to the states is March 31, 2021. However, that data is typically derived from the final data that are required to be delivered by December 31, 2020. And those data have not yet been delivered. The December 31 data are the critical in the states where there are more than one US House district. We aren't one of those states, so that the configuration and the content of that data set is not what we can use for reapportionment. Our statutory deadline in Title 3 of the Vermont statutes is, sorry, it's in Title 17, is that we have to get a final report and map to the Senate by July 1. And then we have to get what's called a tentative House plan to the House by July 1. In the House process, but not in the Senate, there is an opportunity for towns to weigh in and comment and criticize the apportionment board's tentative House proposal. The town's deadline is August 1, and the apportionment board has until August 15 to issue its final House report and map. So if in a year in which we get the final census data by March 31, that gives us April, May, and June, 3 months to get the work done for those, the Senate final report and the tentative House report. I started, having done this before, I started agitating, working on this actually a couple of years ago, Madam Chair, for a number of reasons. One, it struck me that while the census data only come out once every 10 years, there are census estimates that are reasonably useful. It strikes me that it would be a good thing for the apportionment board and from time to time the House and Senate government operations committees to take a look at this so that when the end of 2020 rolls around, we're not starting from a completely cold start, and that we're sort of got the juices flowing and we're getting organized. So we managed to get the apportionment board appointed in July of last year, July and into August, which was 4 months earlier than the last time around. Last time around, the apportionment board didn't meet until the very end of November in 2010. And this year we started meeting in September. We've had monthly meetings ever since then. So that's one snapshot of the time constraints that we're encountering. And I would also comment that when we get our work done, it's not unusual for the Senate and the House to establish a committee process that predates the opening of the next legislative session. And in other words, if we get our work done on time or close to on time and deliver it, there's nothing stopping the Senate and House committees of jurisdiction from starting to work on that this coming fall, so that those committees, at least, and their membership are ready to go when the gavel comes down in January of 2022. And considering that since the last reapportionment cycle, the primary date has been advanced, and the need to get a bill, House bill and a Senate bill passed by both bodies and signed by the governor by maybe the first week in May, at the latest, is going to be that there's going to be a real push for that, so that the process of getting ready for the primary and printing, getting petitions out and getting ballots finalized and ready and campaigning, knowing what district you're going to be campaigning in, to be blunt about it, there's going to be a lot of pressure. So to the extent that the committees of jurisdiction could get started before January of next year, they probably ought to at least give some thought to that. In the meantime, I mentioned the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, which is a terrific outfit that I, for one, was not very familiar with until this time around. But they take data that the US Census generates in the community survey work that the US Census does, and that doesn't happen just once every 10 years. That has sort of an ongoing feel to it, so that the VCGI now has some reasonably good estimated population data for Vermont that is roughly late 2018, maybe early 2019 based data. And what have we been doing with that? Well, John Adams from the VCGI worked with us to take that estimated data and drop it into all of the existing Senate and House districts. So we now have, on an estimated basis at least, population figures for all the existing Senate and existing House districts, expressed both as a raw number of people, the people who live in those districts, and as a percentage of the ideal number of residents for the perfect House and Senate district. And those ideal districts are for the House, you take the state population, and for a single member district, you divide it by 150. Two-member district, you double that. For the Senate, you take the state's population and divide it by 30, and that's your ideal one-member House, rather Senate district. So the VCGI data are now available in a map, kind of a searchable map that shows the negative or positive deviation of below or above the ideal number of residents for those districts. And that is the currency, the data that drives much of the apportionment board's work and will drive much of the committees of jurisdiction's work when they get their hands on this. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but I want to first tell you about where we are with the mapping software. 10 years ago, we used a mapping software called Maptitude, which takes the US Census data, drops it into districts, the Vermont House and Senate districts, such that if you say, well, this Senate District A looks like it's got a significant negative population deviation, we need to try to add some people to that Senate district so that the overall deviations in the Senate map are tighter. There's not as much variation. So you could use Maptitude to say, well, let's move a town from a different Senate district into this Senate district, and instantaneously the software will tell you what that looks like and what it does to both of those districts. Likewise in the House. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to figure out a way to get authority to use the estimated census numbers and drop those into Maptitude. And that may be a licensing issue with Maptitude. They may well be concerned about the integrity of data and having two different sets of data in play. I know that the Legislative Council's IT shop has been working on that problem, but I don't think they've got the answer that we were looking for. So but even on an estimated basis, that what I'll call it the estimated maps has allowed the apportionment board to identify the House and Senate districts where the either high positive or significant negative population deviations indicate that those districts are going to need some attention. One of the legal standards that we are bound by is called the metric is called the overall deviation for the map. The overall deviation you take for the Senate map, for example, by looking at the Senate district with the greatest positive population deviation over the ideal number of residents, and comparing it to the Senate district with the greatest negative population deviation. The spread between those two districts is the overall deviation. If you look at the, this is the Senate map that was adopted in 2012. If you look at that map, the overall deviation on the map is 18.01, which means on average, somewhere on that map, there was a Senate district with a -9 and somewhere there was a +9. Now, those numbers are not exact, but that's what you come up with. I think, in fact, Franklin Senate district's deviation was a +10.83, and Essex Orleans was a -7.18, something like that. What the courts have said is that overall deviation can't be greater than a certain level. The courts have been cautious about giving a hard and fast number for that limit, because under our Constitution and under general apportionment jurisprudence, state and federal, other factors can be taken into account to some extent in drawing a map of legislative districts. The term that our Constitution uses is equality of representation. And the Vermont statutory version of that is substantially equal weighting of the votes of all voters across the state. But it's clear from what the courts have said that as an overall deviation number gets in the high teens, it becomes risky. We don't know whether the 18.01 overall deviation from the existing Senate map, or at least the way the map was under the 2010 census, is too great, because no one challenged it in court. And when the Vermont Supreme Court has looked at these things, when a case has been filed challenging a district, they have refrained from laying down a hard and fast cap on what that overall deviation is. To a significant extent, the court would look at exactly what the record was that the apportionment board, and in this case the Senate, put together as to why you ended up with that overall deviation. You know, and so to the extent that the documentation and the reasoning that you put into your reports, the apportionment board's report and what the Senate and the House do, if it's challenged, you can go to the Supreme Court and say, well, these are the reasons. And our Constitution says that we're supposed to strive or seek to adhere to boundaries of counties and other existing political subdivisions. And probably on another day, Madam Chair, we can get into county lines and Senate district maps, because there's a lot of stuff there to talk about. But the House overall deviation from the last time around was 18.9, a little bit higher than the Senate. Nobody challenged that. Nobody challenged that. If you look at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information estimated data that has been dropped into the existing Senate and House district maps, the overall deviation currently in the Senate map is 24.92. And you get that from the estimates are that the Bennington district is a -10.17, and The Chittenden district is a plus 14.75. Franklin's a plus 14.3, Lamoille's plus 13.19. And all of this information, committee members, the apportionment board has a website on the top banner at the Secretary of State's webpage. You'll see a place to click for apportionment. That'll take you to the apportionment board's website. And within that, there is a link to the data that the Center for Geographic Information has put together. And that's where those estimated Senate district and House district deviations are located. So that's you're almost a 25 overall deviation. Don't feel bad though, because in the House, it's closer to 35.
Whoa.
Because the population variations show up as more significant spikes the smaller the geographic unit you look at. It makes perfect sense. In the state's population, I think the census estimates will have dropped by a couple of thousand people over the 10-year period we're looking at. The VCGI data, even though we can't use it in this nifty mapping software, at least is helping us on an estimated basis to identify districts that have deviations that are going to need some attention. And I guess I'll finish my main testimony, Madam Chair, with this. There are two generic ways of approaching redistricting and mapping. One way is an incremental approach. So if you say, well, we've got an overall deviation on the Senate map of just under 25. We know we need to get that down below 20. What is the fewest number of changes to the existing Senate map that you could make and get that overall deviation down to what I'll call a constitutionally safe place? And of course, when you, as I indicated earlier, when you want to fix a district that has a low population, you are looking at bringing in population from some other district, with the result that you've changed the deviation on that district as well. And maybe you've caused a problem there in trying to fix the district that you were focused on initially. And if you look at the history of redistricting, certainly at the legislative level, when the action goes to the Senate and the House, that is an incremental approach has been what happens largely. The other approach would be more of a from scratch approach, and that would sound something like this. If the Constitution and the statutes talk about substantially equal weighting of votes, which means, translated to districts, is that the districts should have populations as close to each other as you can figure out how to do. You can say, we're going to do it, we're going to take a look at this Senate map or this House map from scratch, and we're going to try to come up with districts that have minimum deviations, because that's more equitable. Where that approach tends to go, and and well, let me back up. The other factor when you start doing that is, are you going to go with all single member districts, or are you going to go with singles and multi-member districts? It's really a completely different way of approaching things. There are advocates in Vermont, and some of them more to a greater or lesser extent are members of the apportionment board, who feel that single member districts are fundamentally a better unit of representative democracy than multi-member districts. So if you took a from scratch approach, what you would start writing, bumping up against almost immediately, is this language in our Vermont Constitution that says that the General Assembly, in doing the redistricting, and this applies to the Senate as well as to the House, shall seek to maintain geographical compactness and contiguity, and to adhere to boundaries of counties and other existing political subdivisions. That's qualified. It's not stated in the absolute as much as the substantial equality is stated as an absolute. But it means that all things being equal, and I suppose we've all learned the hard way that there never are equal. If the closer you try to get these deviations, this overall spread, the tighter you make that, the more likely that you are going to create a map that has much less resemblance to a county map than we currently see with the Senate districts that we have now. Those are the two general approaches. And my lastly, and this applies with equal force to the House map, Madam Chair, is that if you sort of stand back and look at what's happened to the population of the state of Vermont, and this, if you've been following this, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been happening on a gradual but somewhat steady basis, for 30, 40 plus years. You could, and if you stand back and say, let's look at the population bulge in Lamoille, Franklin, and Chittenden, and let's look at the population ebbing in Bennington, Rutland,
Wyndham,
Windsor, and you could say, maybe we should have another senator in the northwest quadrant of the state.
Can I, Tom, I'm going to.
That's maybe a good place to stop.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting into a little more detail than I think we need right today. And I'm cognizant of the fact that we're about 5 minutes behind actually we're more because we didn't take a break. But I'm going to suggest, I think that where Tom stopped was, or where I made him stop, was is a huge issue that we're going to have to deal with next year. And the only, the other thing we're going to have to deal with is we passed last year a bill that says that no Senate district can have more than 3 people. So that means that even if we did nothing else, Chittenden has to break up. So, but they're going to be huge issues. So what I would ask us to do is probably in a month at the end of February, would it be possible for the 2 of you to come back and maybe have more clarity then about what numbers we might have and where we might go? And I think, Tom, you are right on about thinking that the, because it is going to be a huge issue this year, I think, huger than, I chaired it in the last one, whatever that year was. And I think that it's going to be even huger this year because of that shift and
Yeah.
because of the 3-member prohibition. Will we, that you're right about us starting early. So would we, by the end of February, be any farther along so that we know more what we're talking about?
In terms of the delivery of the final census numbers, I hope we know a lot more in 2 weeks, but
Okay.
we won't know until we get there. There is a U.S. Senate bill that was introduced last week to delay the U.S. Census finalization 3 to 4 months to give the census an opportunity to correct what the sponsors of that bill feel are grave errors or
Okay.
mismanagement. There's litigation pending in a number of places in federal court to try to do the same thing, is to slow it down. From our perspective, we're trying to, we have this interest in getting it moving, but we want it to be done right. And I certainly think by the end of February, we will know where much more than we know now. We might even know in a couple of weeks. And I'll make sure that as we learn more about that, we'll give you the information. And I'll also say, you have 2 or 3 members of the staff attorneys on legislative council who are keeping a very close eye on that issue as well. And you have them at your, I know they'd be happy to come in and talk to you.
So let's schedule this again for the end of February when we'll have more information. And then also talk about whether we'll need, if we want to have a reapportionment committee set up so that it can start over the summer, fall, if we need to have legislation around that in the Senate, because in the Senate, it isn't just the Government Operations Committee. So I'll find out that information and see what we need to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So with that, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Jason, thank you for conducting a great
You are very welcome, Chair. I would say I put some stuff in the chat if everybody wants to. What Tom said is definitely true with John. John was on our committee, and so I work with him nice and quietly. He's amazing, but he did something that you might find interesting. He ran a daily tabulation of census counts from the start of the census until it ended for each county. So that link is in there if you want to see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow.
So Tom,
is there,
you're not the only nerd, Tom. I'm an information nerd. So
well, and John is an information. John, for all the senators, is married to Carolyn Wesley, who's our Senate Pro Tem's right hand.
Oh.
And that's John Adams. And I had a question. Oh, Jason, for those of us who cannot possibly read what's in the chat, is there a way can you email those to us, some of those? Because
yes,
the chat disappears once Zoom is gone.
I can.
Thank you.
I can send it to Gail.
That
Okay.
would be, sending it to Gail is always the wisest thing.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair,
Yes,
may we have a break?
we can have a 5-minute break. If you can be back here in 5 minutes,
I just need to do the stairs. I just got to move my body.
upstairs and downstairs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jason, thank you. This was great.
Welcome.
Are we back?
Yep.
Yep.
So Anthony, I may, if I sign off here for a while, I might be having a little minor crisis here. So will you just take over?
Is there anything we can help you with?
I wish you could. Can you come down here right away?
Well, I could start and take a little while to get there.
By the time you get here, it'll be over, I hope.
I can be there in an hour and a half.
Okay, great. Okay, but, and then I have to go to a chairs meeting at 4. So if I'm not back by, then you can either keep on or stop.
Okie doke.
Okay, thanks. So Lauren, we are going to hear about where you are, what your priorities are, and if you can give us some suggestions about the impact of the COVID money that you, if you got any, and what you might need going forward, because we're looking at any money that might be available for our areas of concern.
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to see so many of you and nice to see a new face as well. So thank you. And I'm Lauren Hibbert. I'm Director of the Office of Professional Regulation. And Madam Chair, I hope everything is okay and that you're able to resolve things as quickly as possible. I trust that whatever crisis is happening, it's in capable hands. So I hope it goes well. So I thought I'd just give a very high level overview of what OPR is. I know this is old news to some of you, but since it's the first time that I've ever had an opportunity to speak with Senator Ram, I just thought it would be a prudent thing to do. So the Office of Professional Regulation is
First of all, I'm going to interrupt you 1 second. It's Senator Ram.
Oh, I'm so
manual,
sorry.
except different.
My apologies. I got off on the wrong foot right away. So I apologize, and it's nice to meet you, and I will not mispronounce your name again. So the Office of Professional Regulation is affectionately called OPR, and we have 49 different professions under our umbrella. Everything from tattooists to veterinarians, nurses to dentists, accountants and engineers. We have 39 employees, and we currently oversee, we have almost 80,000 licensees in the state of Vermont that we regulate. That ends up, those 49 different profession types end up to be, profession groups end up to be 167 different profession types. So for instance, in cosmetology and barbering, we have cosmetologists, barberists, nail technicians, and estheticians. So it's one profession, but it's 4 different types of professionals in that one profession. We're currently onboarding massage therapists. That profession goes live in our office on April 1st. So the application is getting tuned up. I looked at it this morning and approved it to go into our system for applications starting to be received. I believe it's March 1st is our target. So lots of things moving and shaking at OPR.
Lauren, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt. Just going back to for Keisha being new. Talk a little bit about Sunrise and how you come up with something like the massage therapist.
Sure, I'm happy to. I'll jump ahead. I was going to talk about Sunrise. So under Vermont law, we have the authority to do sunrises and sunsets, and also scope review, which was an addition that was made last session. So it's under Title 26 in Chapter 57. The authority lies there, and the legislature can ask us to do a sunrise or sunset on a profession. We're authorized to do a sunset on a profession that we currently regulate. We've done many sunrise reports, and I'm happy to send them to you for your review if you're interested. We've done, last year we did an addendum to a previous sunrise that we've written. We actually wrote 2 reports on massage therapy, and then we did an addendum last year. So a total of 3 reports. And the massage is a great example because the goal of the sunrise is to look at the landscape, the professional landscape of the profession or occupation that's asking to be regulated or asking not to be regulated. It could go either direction. We see it in both directions. And we're really doing an assessment of what structures are out there to protect the public from harm. That's our primary goal in regulation in the state. Is we want to set up the minimum regulatory structure that will protect the public. So our first 2 sunrises on massage therapy recommended that there be no government oversight of the profession. And then we were asked specifically by SGO to look at massage therapy through 2 lenses: 1, human trafficking, and 2, sexual misconduct, because there was a very public case where a massage therapist was sexually exploiting his customers. So we did our 3rd sunrise review through those 2 lenses and found that registration would be effective at preventing one of the 2 harms, and that is sexual misconduct. Unfortunately, human trafficking is just such a large, huge criminal operation that I don't think OPR is going to make a significant dent in human trafficking. We may be able to be helpful, but I don't think we're going to be able to prevent it. We won't be able to prevent sexual misconduct either, but when there is a bad actor, there will be a complaint mechanism where someone can come to our office, file a complaint, we'll investigate that complaint, and then we have the authority and appropriate regulatory mechanisms to remove them from practice. And that's an important piece of our public protection mechanism. We not only come to the legislature and ask for guidelines and structures through statutes and rulemaking for what is required, what the qualifications are for a professional, but we also have the authority to receive complaints, prosecute those complaints, investigate those complaints, and then remove or remediate someone's behavior. And I'm a prior public defender. I love that most of OPR's goal is to get our professionals back into the workplace, to get them back into the place where they will be successful in the field. We do that through a variety of means. We investigate a significant amount of drug diversions. We have definitely see that some of our professionals struggle with addiction. We try to get them back to a place of sobriety and support so they can get back into the profession. Sometimes there's practice issues. So we have supervised practice or corrective measures, classes that people can take to correct sort of the professional shortcomings that they may have experienced. And a lot of our cases come from failure to phone a friend. So sometimes we're just creating a friendship network, a colleague support system for someone so that when they encounter that problem again, they have someone to call. So that's very high level what OPR is. I don't know if there are any questions about OPR or what our role is that I haven't addressed. Okay. Well, here comes the part where I'm very proud, although it's sure to be short-lived, that the OPR bill is small. It's 7 pages currently.
Wow.
I know, Senator White, you're completely right to say this to me because it won't stay that way. But today, I can be happy today. So the OPR bill, we always have a bill because of the wide diversity of our professions and multiple areas of basically the occupational landscape that we cover. We always have some cleanup that we need to do and some slight tweaks. So we do have some cleanup in Title III, which is our umbrella structure, Senator Rahm. It's our it's sort of the overarching, it goes over all of our professions, not just a specific one. So that's all within Title III. So we have some cleanup there, but significantly, I won't go through every provision that we're looking at, but significantly, we're asking the legislature to allow the director to grant experience from a Department of Labor apprenticeship towards the experience required for specific licensure groups, and to allow that to happen by policy. So that's a goal that came out of our Department of Labor grant that we still are under. We just received a 1-year no-cost extension to our federal Department of Labor grant, which I'll just speak on very quickly. Some of you have heard me talk about it quite a bit, but we did receive a 3-year, now 4-year grant from the federal Department of Labor to look at occupational licensure, particularly for professions that do not require a baccalaureate degree, and through the lenses of certain populations. So the populations are new Americans, people with criminal backgrounds, military spouses and exiting military members, and the chronically disadvantaged or poor, people who may struggle to take out large student loans or to incur a lot of student loan debt. So we're looking at several of our programs. We've accomplished quite a bit of work there. But this is a piece where apprenticeships have really come to the forefront for our OPR through this work, because apprenticeships are a way to gain experience and knowledge without student loan debt. And sometimes earning while you're learning, which is a really good way to help people who may otherwise be discouraged from going back to school or going to school for the first place. So this would be a provision that would allow me to work with the Department of Labor and decide by policy which of their apprenticeship programs would count towards certain professions within OPR. Also in our, is there a question there or should I move forward? Okay. We also are adding a section to the unprofessional conduct standards that cover all of our professions, which is engaging in a conduct of a character likely to deceive, defraud, or harm the public. We've had some complaints that don't fit into the previous types of unprofessional conduct, and we would like to be able to prosecute and hold people accountable for that activity. Then moving into our Title 26 jurisdictions, in funeral, we're looking to expand the definition of a limited services funeral establishment. It would allow someone who's doing something like a green burial to go into somebody's home and do a memorial in somebody's backyard, for instance, something of that nature, basically being a little bit more creative with the funeral home establishments. In pharmacy, we're looking to add unprofessional conduct standards back into the chapter. This really comes out of data that we've been receiving from both our complaints that we've been receiving in recent years, but also we just did a big survey for all of our pharmacists and saw some issues out there in the field. So this would prohibit quotas or staffing practices that would encourage dangerous or practices that may cause patient harm. And it also would require that entities, when they're changing from one corporation to the other, ensure accountability and transparency to the consumer of what was happening in that pharmacy transfer. We're seeing some issues with patients kind of getting stuck and not being happy about that. So we're just hoping to add a little bit more statutory structure around that process. In acupuncture, we're seeking to remove an outdated reference to the Chinese herbology exam. We no longer offer a Chinese herbology endorsement, so we'd like that removed from the statute. In tattooing, we'd like to add the term microblading. This is something that happens, it's a permanent cosmetic. It's tattooing of eyebrows. There's quite a bit of kerfuffle about who's allowed to do it, and it's squarely in the tattooist. So we'd like to add that definition to the tattooist chapter. And then in the nursing home administrators arena, we are asking for session law to be included that would strike from the administrative rules of the nursing home administrators a requirement that their supervision be done directly, meaning in the same building. The rules are outdated. They were written quite some time ago. I don't have the year that they were updated in front of me, but it was certainly before COVID, certainly even before 2020s. And now someone can be supervised through digital means very well in a way that when the rules were written and adopted, that was not even contemplated. So there's quite a shortage of nursing home administrators in general. That was true even before COVID happened. And then the stress put on them during this time is truly unprecedented. And also it would help with the coming and going of people in and out of these facilities. So we think this is a good way to go, and obviously we will update the rules, but it just can't be the first priority right now. And this is a pressure gap on nursing home administrators. So we're thinking this session law is a good approach to solve the problem. And that's the OPR bill. That isn't the end of OPR's priorities though. That's just the end of the OPR bill as written, which is why the bill may get to more than 7 pages, as Madam Chair aptly reminded me very quickly. So does anyone have any questions on the OPR bill?
Senator Clarkson?
So I understand the House has a general contractor bill. Are we not going to revisit that?
That was about to come into my other priorities, Senator Clarkson.
Then I will let you take it as you wish.
Senator Rahm?
I don't know if this was exactly related to the bill, but you said something about specific consideration for new Americans, and I'd love to see that language if possible. I think what we have in our folder is just your mixed martial arts letter. So I just don't have a whole lot of other language to look at. So if there's something you could send, that would be great. And I don't know if I really caught this right. For whatever reason, I used to be the expert on funerals and burial grounds when I was on House General. But I'm really interested to hear about that change, particularly if it is related. A lot of new Americans, particularly Hindus, like to have final rites of passage in their backyards, someone's body. That happens in my family. So it's great to hear that that's a possible change that's being made, but would love to hear more about that body of work.
Sure. I can absolutely give you some more information on funeral, particularly as we get more into the bill, but it is intended to allow those sort of backyard memorials and services. And it was directly related to green burial, but could be more related to different traditions and belief systems as well, I'm sure. The New Americans language is not in the bill. It's just, and I will just say on general, we are always, with this grant, we're trying to look at best practices for licensure that will benefit everybody, but through these lenses. And what we have found is really, when we look at what's best for new Americans, it really is best for everybody. And I think that's, in talking with other new American groups and sort of talking about this with state agencies, you really find that government isn't incredibly open or transparent or even comprehensible to anybody. And so when we improve it for new Americans, we're really improving it for everybody. So the bill doesn't have anything specific to new Americans in it. I will say that we have done a lot of work under the grant for new Americans. 2 years ago, we had a bill which requires us to write rules. We're currently in development of those rules. They're about to go out to public comment. They were a bit postponed due to COVID, where we have to have a process by which we look at training of people who are trained outside of America. A lot of our professions requirements are very American based, which is a problem. And we need to have a process by which the director, whoever is sitting in that seat, it just currently happens to be me, can look at experiences outside of America and make equivalency determinations. So we have a rule that's about to go to LCAR and ICAR, about to be filed in ICAR actually, around that process, so that we can get that experience equivalence determinations made for someone who's foreign trained. We're in the process of making an informational video for our website that will be translated into many languages, so that explains basically exactly what I just explained to all of you about who we are, what we do, how we operate, so that we can have sort of an infomercial on how someone can get a professional license in the state of Vermont. But that will benefit everyone, and not just new Americans, but it has the ability to be translated into many different languages, which is part of our grant work. So this bill doesn't have any language specific to new Americans, but we're always looking at it. It's a high priority for us.
You've just preempted so many of my concerns and philosophical beliefs. So I just really appreciate that. And I'm really happy to help as I keep my ear to the ground, because that's a population I particularly serve here in my county.
Right.
Well, we would appreciate any insight that you have. And, I think we have the burden to integrate and to learn, but that is sometimes hard to know who to communicate with. So we'd appreciate any help that you have as well.
Senator Clarkson, do you have a question?
I do. You in part answered it, which is the discretion we gave you as the director to consider licensure and training in other jurisdictions, in other countries. I mean, this again goes to new Americans and others, and even our own citizens who choose to be educated elsewhere. I'm glad to hear it's moving from your discretion to actually moving into rules, so that while we have a divine director of OPR right now, whose discretion I trust, we might not always. And I'm happy to see that's moving forward.
Yes. No, I appreciate your trust, and I really appreciate that. But I think a process is important to hold any government actor accountable. So that's why the rules are really necessary, and a transparent, publicly posted process is important as well. Because, for instance, with the second chance determination, which was a bill, not new Americans, but people with criminal backgrounds, and Senator Rahm, that is somebody who has a criminal background, who may not know if they would be able to be, let's say, an accountant. Before they even go to school, the legislature gave us the authority to get a predetermination application, which means that They would tell us which profession they were interested in and what their criminal background is. We would review it and we would say if that would be a bar to ever becoming an accountant. And for $25, you can get that determination that's binding on the agency if nothing else changes in your life. So if you don't have another criminal conviction or, violate parole and you, and you have a criminal background and we say, yes, that's okay, you can become an accountant, then you can go to school, become an accountant, invest that money, and trust that when you leave college, you will be able, and your master's program, you will be able to become an accountant. And that was something that a few other states are doing. It's just a lot of people with criminal backgrounds don't make the investment in higher education and training because they believe, without knowing, that it will be a bar to their professional licensure. And we actually license a lot of people with criminal backgrounds. It's something I'm very proud of. I really think that access to the professional landscape and employment is something we can do. If we as a society believe in rehabilitation, we have to allow for people to become licensed as professionals, even though they have criminal backgrounds. So it's a case-by-case determination, and we're careful about it. But it's something that we do and that I'm very proud of. So
well, and key to bringing our recidivism numbers down. Key.
Yes.
Well, Lauren, do you want to take a couple minutes to go through the non-OPR bill priorities that you have?
Sure. I'm just going to take a sip of water and then I'll be ready.
Okay.
All right. So first is the nurse compact, the interstate nurse compact. That made it.
Oh, we did that.
You guys did, but the House didn't.
The House failed the act.
It stopped in the House. So it was a victim of COVID, and I'd like to resuscitate it. And I believe there's a House bill and a Senate bill, both similar to last session. Both bills, I believe, are going to be introduced. Then there's home contractors, which made it through the Senate in the first session of last biennium, but then did not move significantly forward after that. And there is a House bill that has language that I believe and understand will be almost identical to what was passed by the Senate last session. Home contractors is another example of a profession where we did a sunrise review, Senator Rahm, and we found that there is significant risk to the public by not having any government oversight of home contractors. Currently, home contractors are not regulated by anyone in the state. And there's not requirements on them in terms of professional practice or conduct. And what we are recommending, or what we did recommend, was a mandatory registration where everyone who's engaging in the conduct needs to be registered. And then some very light requirements on that practice, because it's such a diverse field and so many different variations of practice in the field. So it has a threshold of when you need to be registered, a monetary threshold. So I believe the current bill is $2,500. If the amount of work is over $2,500, you must be on the registry. And then if you're doing a job and you're on the registry, then you need to have a written contract. And we'd have a model contract on our website, very simple form that would be so that the consumer would know what they were agreeing to and the contractor would know what they were agreeing to, with some terms and an insurance requirement. What we found through a review, and this was in partnership with the AGO's office, is that there's a lot of consumer fraud occurring in this area. And there's a very large information difference, which is one reason why we find that we do need to regulate a profession. If, you know, doctors know a lot, the patient doesn't know a lot. That's why the government's in the space and regulates the doctors. And that's a similar situation with home contractors. And depending on who you are, you can level that out a little bit. There was a lot of testimony about the Vermont handshake and that we're ruining the Vermont handshake. And I appreciate the Vermont handshake, but in order for that handshake to work, both sides need to have equal power in the handshake. And what we found was with home contractors, that's not always true. And people are putting down $6,000, $12,000, $18,000 deposits to make a modification to their single asset, their only asset. People don't have retirement savings, they have their homes here, and they're making an investment in their homes, and then somebody's walking away with their money. And that's just simply not protective. So that was why we're recommending registration of home contractors. But there's a lot more testimony to be heard on that. Obviously, that's a big topic, but we are supportive of that. Today, we filed a Sunrise report on music therapists, and I can forward that to the committee. We are recommending a voluntary certification for music therapists. We find that the harm does not require mandatory registration, and nor does it require qualifications-based licensure, but it would, the marketplace, consumers, and the field would benefit from voluntary certification. So I suspect that there will be some legislation around that, but again, it's hot off the presses, filed today. So I will send it to the committee. And then as Senator Rahm referenced, we did write a letter about MMA. We are struggling with the current regulatory overview that we have of MMA. There were some very public instances of MMA fighting occurring in the summer and early fall with kids during COVID. And it really exposed some problems with our current MMA structure. So those are priorities not within the OPR bill, but that are important to OPR. There's one, Senator White was here, but we are partnering with the governor's office on a bill, working with A&R and moving well drillers over to OPR. So that is work that is ongoing. Thank you, Senator Clarkson. So we're working on that, that structural move of well drillers. And this comes out of a report that we wrote with the governor's office last session, reviewing all of the regulatory licensing agencies in the state and reviewing how they're set up and where regulatory licensing functions are working well and where there could be benefits to Vermonters out there by consolidation or streamlining or refocusing how the work is done. There's also a small piece. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to wrap up, but do you have something else to add?
I was just going to say on the governor's bill, the governor, Secretary of State's bill, there also is a small piece coming out of that report where the Agency of Education is asking that we handle the appeals out of their disciplinary cases. And we are agreeing to do that. So that will be a piece of that bill as well.
Okay. I know that Senator Clarkson has another meeting she has to get to, and Senator White has also gone to the chair's meeting. Allison, oh, she's gone. Okay, I thought she was raising her hand to speak, but I appreciate you giving us the rundown, Lauren. And as Senator Collmore knows, and Senator Rahm will find out, we see quite a bit of you throughout the session. So we look forward to it. And I'm glad that most of what you're talking about this time doesn't seem very controversial. No speech pathologists, none of that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of glad.
I hope so, Senator Polina. I hope so, but I can't promise, but I hope so. And I wish that I could see you all in person, obviously.
Yeah, really.
But this Zoom will have to suffice. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate all your good work. And we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Sounds wonderful. Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Bye.
Bye. So we're adjourned.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna stop
Good
the
job,
live.
Senator Polina.
Keisha, did you have something to say?
No, I was just put in charge of stopping the live stream.